Good evening. I'll call the September 2nd meeting of the Jericho Planning Commission to order. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to go over the agenda. We are going to have time for public comment. We'll approve our minutes from August 19th, and then the majority of our time tonight will be a facilitated discussion where we will be building on the work that we just completed that was funded by the bylaw modernization grant, where we looked at changes primarily in the village areas, village centers. And we are going to be looking at some of the other areas of town and balancing different goals and different priorities. And then we'll hear some reports. Welcome back, Chris, from vacation. We definitely missed you while you were gone.
I missed you guys too.
Sorry.
I thought about you.
You don't have to say that. And then we'll plan for our next meeting on September 16th. Would anybody need to make any changes to the agenda? Oh, okay, good to go. Public comment. So for those of you on the Zoom or watching the recording, there are no members of the public here in person. And I can't.
There's nobody online except for Wendy.
Okay, so we don't have any public comment online, so no public comment. Great, goes faster. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of August 19th.
I will move to approve the minutes.
Chris, thank you. And a second?
A second.
Davina. Any corrections or clarifications on the minute? Nope. Okay, vote to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any
Yes.
abstentions? Yes. So Wendy and SJ are abstaining.
No, I'm a yes.
Oh, you're an S. Okay, sorry.
No worries.
And then, so that's everybody, no nos. Okay, thank you. All right, so then we'll turn it over to Fred.
Great, thank you. So I know enable housing and this whole general topic has been on our agenda a lot as we've been queuing this up. I think this is really the first time we're really going to get into discussing some things. So I'm excited about tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting is really just to make sure that what we'll be working on is aligned, that we have shared goals and shared values that we're moving forward with. So, this is just a bit of a refresher in terms of like, how did we get here? So the Affordable Housing Committee had made some recommendations to the select board. I think this goes back as far as the November 21st, 2024 meeting, when that happened at a select board meeting. This is really the catalyst for our current work. So 1 through 9, those are the left column, those are the specific recommendations, and then in the right column is the status. So a number of these things have been partially implemented or fully implemented or somehow addressed as part of the BMG work that we've been finishing up. You can see that in the right column. So we've already started to make some work on that, at least specifically about where these would impact the village center districts. Although the one about the eligibility requirement, removing the constructed prior to 1955 as an adaptive use criteria has been removed. Now it's on a more rolling date. And then I did include number 8, which was to update a fee structure to incentivize rather than burden diverse housing types and building small, I'm missing where there's small housing. On this list, although when these recommendations went to the select board intentionally kept that one for them to work on, and that forwarded it to the planning commission to work on. All right, so this is again just sort of a review of our timeline, what we will be working on from now to the end of December, how we sort of structured all of this. Again, I already said this, but tonight we're reviewing goals and clearly defining why the work matters, how we want to grow in Jericho, and what we want to protect. This also cues up the Planning Commission's next meeting when we'll be discussing housing typologies and allowable uses. So tonight's meeting, we just want to make sure we're on the same goals and we're clear on the goals that we are working toward achieving. So the image on the screen here on the left, it's a tightly clustered development surrounded by working farmland. It's a project that I think visually represents the goals that we're trying to achieve, where we've got more clustered housing with diverse housing types in an area that may be more rural. We want to make sure that we have an agreed upon purpose and understand our core values and where we want to focus our work. So just a little more context for why we are doing this, in addition to the charge from the select board and the town plan. But everyone, this isn't news to anyone, but Vermont and in Jericho, we're facing a real housing shortage in the state and locally. And at the same time, Vermont and Jericho, we want to protect our rural lands and natural resources. And what we're doing as part of this is figuring out how we can achieve both at the same time, how they can complement each other. Vermont is really, it's a leader in promoting smart growth land use policies. That's part of what really the underlying philosophy of what we're going to be looking at. There are a number of principles that are part of smart growth. I just want to kind of go over to a couple of them, which again, none of these I don't think are going to be new, but it's good just to get that on the record. One is to maintain the historic settlement pattern of compact village and urban centers separated by rural countryside. Another is that residential growth, should be targeted to compact and mixed use centers, although we're going to be pushing that a little bit. Protecting and preserving environmental quality and important natural and historic features of Vermont. Providing the public with access to informal and formal open spaces, that'd be like parks, playgrounds, public greens, but also water bodies, forests, mountains, natural open space. Looking at how to strengthen agricultural and forest enterprises and minimize conflicts with development. And then providing for housing that meets the needs of diverse social and income groups in all Vermont communities. So for areas outside of our village center and growth area, this means minimizing sprawl as much as possible and promoting clustered subdivisions, surrounded by working lands and natural resources. So there were 2 articles that were sent out as part of tonight's meeting packet. One was about single-family zoning, the other was about conservation subdivisions. I'm sure everyone has read them at least 3 times or more. I think I'd like to include something like this in each of our meetings. There will be other materials sent out for each of our meetings to take a look at. I'm just calling it 10-minute takeaways. Just an opportunity for us to kind of share what we got out of the articles. And I don't intend this to be super structured and more of a free-flowing conversation. So I don't know who wants to start.
I can go through, they won't be well organized or in a cohesive argument, but some of the things that stood out to me just overall was validating, because I think a lot of what was in the materials provided align with a lot of the work that we've been doing, a lot of the conversations that we've been having, certainly a lot of the conversations that the Housing Committee has been having and hoping to stimulate. A couple of the things that stood out to me, there's, first of all, just in terms of vocabulary, for death to single family zoning and a new life to missing middle. This is kind of like the affordability conversation where the definition can be slightly different depending on what you're looking at, what you're reading. So the missing middle definition that's provided in this piece of literature isn't exactly what the definition that our state has provided for missing middle in their legislature and some of their funding programs. So just to note that here they're really calling out low rise and middle density as missing middle. Which is fine, but I think important to call out. But a couple of the things that I think that stood out to me about that were an argument for taking this approach town-wide and not just focusing on village centers, that there's an argument to be made about equity there and having the same standards imposed on everyone and not just in certain areas. And again, it's a give and take because we're also trying to protect areas, but there was a nice argument there. And also addressing some of the conflict that happens in the housing debate about the role of market rate housing versus subsidized perpetually affordable housing. And one of the things that this article brought up was both allowing for market rate middle housing, so this kind of low height, so no more than 3 floors, more densing middle housing, frees up some of the more affordable options elsewhere. And so for me, and I think for Jericho in particular, I do think we want to keep, we want to make sure that we have an option open for subsidized housing and perpetually affordable housing, and that any opportunity for that we can investigate through partners like Champlain Housing Trust. But really understanding that by really focusing our intentions on building modest housing, we can open up other markets, both here and elsewhere. And I also thought they kind of eloquently made a nice point about one thing that subsidized housing doesn't really do well is integrating socioeconomic and racial integration into higher income, predominantly white areas. And this approach can hopefully help for that. The conservation design article I thought was, again, I even wrote, like, how does this really different from what our current PUD regs look like? Like, it really felt too. It's like, is there anything here that we haven't, that isn't already addressed? But a couple of things that I thought were interesting. We've talked a lot about connection, and Sabina's done a really great job on educating us about connecting protected spaces so that there's, continuous paths for animals to traverse, for example, but also thinking about that in terms of connecting our trail systems. And also, one of the things that I hadn't thought about with community wells and community septic is, yes, it's cost saving. Yes, it means, again, that we're concentrating what you're developing, but that it also in the future may allow for easier connection to municipal things that may be coming on. And so really thinking about that in maybe our village and our low density residential areas as places where if we know that there's a potential for water or for municipal sewer, that really encouraging developers to think that way about community well and septic may be important. And then the last thing that conservation design, that both articles really did was, again, just underscore that it's not just about what use you're allowing and what kind of building you're allowing. There's lots of different regs and different things that you can tweak to both encourage smaller, more modest, denser housing, and also to work in this conservation design model. And I guess my one question for the other then is, what do we need to look at with our PUD regs? I hadn't thought about easement and management plans as a potential burden.
Wait, can you hold on 1 second?
We're having a technical issue, sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
That's okay. You got everything right up until your last.
I hadn't thought about, and in the conservation design, it's particularly about setting aside a parcel that is, perpetually conserved. I hadn't thought about, how big of a burden it may or may not be to have that easement put in place and to have a management plan. And I, just in terms of thinking about cost or thinking about, government capacity or an entity that, I think we have a great example of doing that with the Jericho Underhill Land Trust and the Vermont Land Trust, but just kind of understanding what additional burden that may or may not be adding.
Okay, thank you. All good. Stimulating thoughts is a good way to think about it. Who wants to go next?
Sure, there's a lot more to add, really. think-
I know that was
think
really quite
SJ's kind of
comprehensive.
summarized it pretty well. It is an idealized version of what can happen, as opposed to seeing a lot of, here is a town that had extensive single-family zoning. We did all of these activities, and the result was more denser develops. The closest we have to that was California, saying you can have accessory dwelling units on any lot, and how that changed some of the developments in some of the cities down there, dense urban areas. Whether we can draw a conclusion from that that applies to Jericho, I don't know. Is Jericho a town? Do the citizens of Jericho, the homeowners of Jericho, have a burning desire to subdivide their properties, put up accessory dwelling units? They've had permission to do that for a couple of decades now, and we certainly haven't seen them anywhere. So it suggests to me that it isn't just allowing it. There have to be some special incentives and capabilities and infrastructure to support it. So as I've noted many times before, Jericho really doesn't have an awful lot of single-family homes located with excess septic or well capacity in there. And it's nice to do these things, but if we aren't willing to put in that capacity, it's kind of like saying, here's a superhighway, and by the way, there's your bicycle. Have at it. And that's an issue we have to face. It's not necessarily on planning commission, but it's something we have to. If we can't stare that one down, I'm not sure how much use it's going to be for us.
But we're thinking about rural areas where the septic constraint is not necessarily space. It's more likely to be cost, engineering.
But a constraint nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely a constraint, but right.
Well, if I could jump in, I think one of the ways I've been thinking about it is in the context of the conversations we've had before. I love the contrast in the two articles, right? Because one was really, I agree, was sort of like, oh, this feels very more like in an already, sort of non-rural area versus one that's really for a rural area. So thank you for giving us the two side by side. But when I think about it, one of our conversations where we sort of halted ourselves in the BMG was we wanted to say we didn't want to make any changes that were town-wide without recognizing doing the analysis of the possible negative impacts, right? We were very nervous about unintended consequences. And so I thought the reading these two articles, there was a little bit in there about potential things that we should think about in the unintended consequence still, right? And so one was that if you don't do it townwide, if you don't make all the pieces townwide, that somehow, and I'm not sure I understood this, so this is why I'm pointing it out, that there was some argument that if we didn't make it like a change of zoning to eliminate or to encourage only one single family units, that somehow we would be promoting a hopscotching approach that would create sprawl. There was something, and it was like, wait, that's opposite from what I thought it would do. So does anybody remember that it was sort of this? So anyway, we can figure it out later what the reference really was, but I sort of, again, like, what are we trying to plan for and what are we trying to plan against, right? What we're trying to plan against is somehow changing our zoning in a way that would encourage more like areas of sprawl, right? So paying attention to that. Paying attention to somehow the change would mean that we no longer have the connectivity as Jay mentioned, and Sabina's been really good, like the wildlife corridors. Or we've now created a bunch of dead end roads where there's no connectivity. And so people are now going to be in cars. Like we've now designed it that people are going to be in cars rather than being able to get from place to place through trails or biking or whatnot. So those are the things that I really I was looking for. It's like, what would be the unintended consequences if we were to go to townwide zoning that incentivize more than single family housing. So those are the things that I took away.
I think what you're also pointing out is the difference between suburban metropolitan, where you might have a lot of single family houses spread out over several thousands of acres. And putting in, allowing accessory dwelling units or larger units, smaller units on any lot size. The infrastructure's there, you're not interfering really with any wildlife corridors or special natural areas. And in Jericho, we have a couple town centers where that's present. But the rest of the town, it doesn't take any of us very long to go to an area where you're driving on a road, there's no houses within sight. And they're not within sight for
Right.
quarter mile, half mile or further.
Right.
So that's sort of, how do we balance those
Yeah.
two?
Yeah. And I think just in terms of, usually I like to think about goals as positive, but I think I would like to also, as we think about goals, like both what do we want and what do we want to avoid? So that we're really clear about both.
I guess I was struck by sort of the dilemma of the criticism we've heard often about the history of zoning in Jericho is that it has either intentionally or unintentionally led to exclusivity with the 10-acre zoning lots. And you can see, I think, that one reason that started was to preserve the rural character. But whether it was intended or not, the consequence is with land costs now that it has become something that only wealthy people can afford to build on. So the question I have is, and I don't know what the answer is, but if you wanted to do something that was more equitable, how do you combine that goal with the goal of preserving the natural quality? And I think there are some people in town who would be quite happy with no zoning whatsoever. And I was thinking, a similar approach would be, well, what if there was no minimum lot size anywhere? But the problem is that you then, that it's hard to then control how you protect the natural environment and the rural character. So I don't have an answer. I just it made sort of the single family zoning article made me think about these things, and I don't know what the answer is, other than to think that it's complicated.
To me, there's a big difference between looking at facilitating buildings of multifamily units versus eliminating all minimum lot size. Like one from the going to how do we promote like fourplexes in all parts of Jericho or allowing fourplexes in all parts of Jericho as permitted uses is much less of a leap for me than it is saying eliminating minimum lot sizes.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we do that, don't get me wrong, I'm just.
Oh, I know, I hear,
Just-
but
that's
there's
just
tension for
Sort
sure.
of
I hear that.
a thinking tool,
Yeah.
What does the minimum lot size do for us? What's the? So it has a function.
well, I assume the function is to minimize the development in rural parts of town. I mean, that's, I guess, the positive take on that. The cynical view would be that it's to, create this exclusive enclave of wealthy snobs, but I don't believe that was the original intent.
And historically, if you go back and look at Jericho's land costs and housing costs when those laws were passed, it was 10% of what it currently costs to buy land. 10 acres was not a prohibitive
Well,
price
that
to
was a tiny
purchase.
lot back in the day.
Back in the day, right?
Well, but we're talking the 60s and 70s here. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah,
So I think it was more likely put in to preserve the rural
yeah,
character.
well, that's.
More than let's be exclusive.
No, I know, that's my belief, but
Well, I
Correct.
posed the question, specifically, actually thinking like technically, all over the country, it seems like minimum lot size is like a critical component that regulates the pattern. So it's, or one of the things that regulates the pattern. So that if you think about like a continuum, the village center is the most intense development, and then the rural out there, you've got farms and forests, and that's the least intensive. And that the districts are along this spectrum, and the lot size is an attempt to go from intensity and density to less intensity and density to ultimately like completely natural spaces. So is that, as a planner professional, is that really like, is there some other thing that we should be thinking about when we think about minimum lot size other than sort of along that spectrum? Is that really its primary intention?
I was thinking along the same lines too. I think it's the intensity of development, but on a bigger scale. So even if you said, in these areas, there's no minimum lot size, but you have to you have to set aside 80% of your site as open space. I mean, that would be another way of achieving the same goal, but you're giving more flexibility in how you get development on the site. And instead of, because like right now, the PUD for the rural and the forestry district, I think you can go down to a 0.5 minimum lot size, a 0.5 acre minimum lot size in those areas. Which is already, could be small, but maybe it could be even tighter than that. But if you still maintain a large minimum lot size for the zone, on the bigger picture, you're still maintaining that development pattern of having your more concentrated, clustered, walkable village centers in some areas, and you'd be more creating little islands and
Right, I think when
walkability in other areas.
Heidi, when was talking about the hopscotch, I think that's what
Right.
they were cautioning against
Yeah,
though, is
was
that
that
you create
islands.
these like, great, it's clustered, surrounded by lots of open space, but now it's disconnected as
Yeah.
well.
Well, that was sort of like honestly,
Your place, right?
Yeah.
You're there, but you can't really go anywhere by foot unless you're.
well, exactly. So honestly,
fit.
Chris, the slide that you had, like 2 slides ago that had the like there. Yeah, oh, go one more. Sorry, I was wrong. The next one.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
Other direction.
it was this one.
there you go.
Yeah.
Like the clustered conservation subdivision, I look at that and I think like, why would we want that? If you have those in 5 different places, now you have isolated, disconnected clusters,
Because.
right? Cause there's no longer, like better, like, yes, maybe it's better than the left side, but it's not doing anything for interconnectivity of trails and maybe it's helpful for wildlife. I don't know. I mean, I when I first looked at it, I thought like, huh, it was not an immediate like, oh yeah, this is great. It was like, it raised concerns for me, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That is sort of,
Inarticulately.
that is the human settlement pattern, is to settle within groups around other houses where you have, going back to ancient history, where you have defense, shared access to resources and so on. The fact that we have vehicles allow us to go further apart. But if you look at maps, go to any of the old maps that we have, the one on the right is what most towns had. And then a lot of, single farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere kind of stuff.
Oh, I agreed. What I was seeing in this was that the assumption was left side is bad, right side is good. And I looked at right side and I thought,
That too has
There-
some bad.
there
things.
might be something in there that's
For
not good,
improvement, for sure, because
right?
you have all those single family homes below, right on the road. So the question is, if the intent of a conservation subdivision is to allow the resource to function as it should, then you would have to say, based on the picture on the right, is that actually the case? And could we do better?
I just wanna not make an assumption that like, oh, great, that's the solution.
No,
Right.
What
I
could
think
be
it's hard
happening
to
on the
find
right?
pictures of what we want.
Yeah, yeah.
What could be happening on the right is a site that is maybe 80% wetland. And you
Sure,
don't want to develop on it.
Yeah.
But we want to maximize housing where we can
right,
get
right,
it.
right. Yeah,
So having a structure in place where connectivity issues aside, you're getting more, there may be an appropriate way to get more housing in a place.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm going back to Chris Brown's, it's complicated.
The other thing that at least I made me think, when you were talking, Heidi, I think you mentioned the lack of connectivity and that having a townwide, a more robust, and with more trails, ped and bike plan is important, because I don't know if I have a problem with pockets of clustered stuff scattered around, if it's achieving the broader goal of protected open space that's interconnected.
Right.
But then it'd be great if there was a trail system that you actually could live there and bike, or even if it's a mile or 2 miles, you could bike to a town center and not really be relying on a car all the time.
So that gets us back to our friends, the official map, right? Because all of those things would be
Yeah.
delineated on the official map. That's how we got into I was in the group that was on the first official map sort of subcommittee, and that was our first task, was to get the bike ped stuff onto the map, and that's kind of where it fell apart and ended, but
But the
that would be a
current,
reason to get that happening.
the current zoning districts map might help us, because if we're thinking about connectivity, we have paved roads and we have dirt roads, and we have some sidewalks and we have plenty of areas with no sidewalks. We do have a bike ped plan that has some envisioning of bike ped. So if I'm like imagining the zoning district map, it seems like the low density residential district, which tends to be more linear because it's close to the roads and it's close to where some of that infrastructure might already exist, is maybe offers a different opportunity still for clustered subdivision, but that's different than when I think about, the top of Silly Hill or Nashville Road or something that's much more remote, where to connect that would be so much harder, so much more expensive, so many more years, so many fewer people that would be benefiting from it. So I think you're right to think that the map overall it might be once again, not one size fits all.
I would add that, well, we seem to be, no one seems to say, oh yeah, cluster development is the greatest thing, but no one's saying it's the worst thing. When we talk about transportation, having a cluster of dwelling units where, let's say you've got 20, 30 families living together, opens up or makes it more feasible to have some form of mass transit service, whether it's a bus that comes by once or twice a day, or any other form of public transit to get from there to a city center. So the advantage of the one on the right is just that. You could have a bus stop. Jericho doesn't have bus service, I get it, we may never get it, but that is, again, in many other parts of the world, that is a settlement pattern where you don't need the car to live. We are in a part of the country where if you're not in the village centers, it's pretty hard to do much without a vehicle.
We do have a bus system though with the school buses.
Yep.
So in terms of the schools servicing the neighborhood,
It does do
like
that.
your point is well taken, that the neighborhood on the right
More efficient.
has more, would be more efficient.
Yeah.
Wendy, we kind of like hopped on your hop onto Chris's comment, so I want to come back to you and see if, what else you might like to add.
Oh, well, this might get, oh, I just clicked on a button that is so much better. I can see your faces. Actually, you all were so small. I was feeling disconnected, but now I get between the meeting and the Chris Shaheen screen, so I'm a lot happier now. But one thing that, and we don't have to go down this because this might be out of scope for this conversation or at this point anyway. But one thing that those articles did for me was like as a jumping off point for other sources of information that I think are important and will help inform, this, it feels like a journey that we're on. And, I went back and I read through the town plan, the resilience, stewarding resilient communities, and then went back and read through, I think it's chapter 3, the natural resources. And there's so many, important documents. There's about 3 or 4 different maps that I think need to be part of this conversation. And I think that they should be part of the conversation sooner rather than later, because, one is that they're helping to identify, and Chris, this is jumping to your questions about, what it is important to safeguard. So maybe I'm skipping ahead to that, but, because a lot of those places, ecosystems that we've already begun to identify them. We're updating where they might be, how they might have changed over the past 10 years. And I just think we should be looking at that in tandem to talking about all the things that we're talking about here tonight.
I think we can get to because I think we're touching on some of this stuff already. But I know Sabina and Susan, I don't think either of you have had an opportunity to share.
The key takeaways.
Yeah, if you want to, you don't have to.
I don't have anything brilliant to add to what's been said, and I think, in keeping with the 10-minute timeline, I don't want to go over 2 minutes. So
It's turned into more like 10 minutes each, but that's okay.
But me, I need to percolate. All of my things that I want to say will come to me tomorrow at noon.
Perfect. One of my takeaways was a lot of what's already been said, but that the article talked a lot about policies in addition to zoning, so that it's the job of accomplishing these goals is zoning plus policy. I thought that it was interesting that the article, well, I do want to say for the record that Jericho has no single family zoning, because everywhere in Jericho, and I think this is true now in Vermont, every place that that a single family home can be built, a duplex can be built. So we've already done the depth to the single family, but in any event, that they talked about missing middle with specific criteria around locations that were especially helpful. Where the land use can be efficient, where you can be close in enough to the town center, where the construction costs are better for missing middle than for bigger commercial development in a lot of ways. They said like no lot assembly required, you're not doing commercial financing. So I think missing middle is going to be really powerful for us and probably really well suited for our location, our lack of public transit. I thought there was an emphasis on low impact development when they were talking about lot coverage, and our current zoning pays sort of like lip service to it. It's like, hey, try to do it if you can. And I'm thinking that was a long time ago that we said, try to do it if you can. Not even we, this is before our time, that might be techniques and best practices that help us with the balance of housing and environmental protection by using techniques and requiring techniques of low impact development. And I had the same comment, like our PUD regulations seem like they're in the right ballpark and maybe need to be improved. And I just kept imagining that low density residential district as really where there's probably a decent amount of opportunity. I also did a little bit of research offline in the interim about infill, because we've had this question, like, where does infill really work? And infill is kind of a pipe dream. And everything I found about infill was that infill was extremely directed and strategic. So I think I was naive and thought, oh, infill, kind of like what Eric was just saying, like, oh, we have all these houses, we'll just add some in between. And that's not how anybody does infill. The way the world or professionals do infill is exactly how we're thinking about Riverside. You have this developed area, you have a vacant and underutilized lot, and you have underutilized buildings, and you target those places and figure out how can we get more use and more tax revenue and more houses or more businesses, it depends on what you want, out of this land. It's not like a generic across the board, like, which makes me kind of want to go back and look at how we talked about it in the town plan and how David White kind of framed it, because I think that it's more of like a parcel by parcel, area by area, building by building, because all the examples I found were like that. They were like, oh, this town, they had this, opera house and they decided to make it into a hotel, or they had this hotel and they decided to make it into an apartment, like very strategic, very directive.
Targeted infill does not sound like the gentle infill that's in the town plan.
Right. And so I think like that was a real brain shift for me.
Yeah.
But I still think the infill, it still comes back to septic and water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hard to have the conversation when that will, as long as that is the highest limiting factor.
Mm-hmm.
Just that's the problem.
If I can take that a little further, Chris, infill doesn't necessarily mean you're putting in more housing. It could also mean you're taking existing housing, tearing it down and putting up something new. For a lark, I went and looked back at where a house I lived in when I was in high school. in Bethesda, Maryland. And I did a Google Street View. The house I lived in looked about the same. But the house that was across the street was a bungalow when I lived there. And now it's a 3.5-story McMansion. The lot size didn't change. The lot coverage did, the house went up. So imagine over in Sunnyview, or imagine in Griswold, someone comes in and infill, buys one of the ranches that's there and says, hey, I'm putting in, because I now don't have any limits on my square footage, instead of it being a $400,000 home, torn down and built up with $1 million. I don't believe that kind of infill is what we want. And that's, I've left undirected. I think that's what we'll get.
Well, I guess I've very open mind about the concept of infill. I can imagine all kinds of great ways to infill in all kinds of different parts of Jericho, but you just have to have the infrastructure to do it. So I think personally think it's a great concept for Jericho.
In the right place.
Once we have the infrastructure.
Right, if I could, I mean, and one of the things that, just to bring us zoom out a little again though, because part of what we're trying to figure out is what are our goals? As opposed to what's, sort of, first we have to say, what is it that we want? And then there's how do we get there? And then we have the very realities of what is possible and what's not possible. But I think that what I understand is for right now, the goal, because we're going back into the same conversation we've had before, as opposed to the new conversation, which is the one that I think is teed up for tonight, which is, sort of what is it that we want to do? And this challenge that we feel is before us. We've struggled with a lot of things. We made some very difficult balances in what we're recommending and we're hoping is going to be adopted by the select board on Thursday night for the town villages and centers. And now the next thing is, okay, when we're out of that and we're in the next concentric circle or further out, what are our goals going to be for there? Recognizing that we still have all the other challenges that we've already said, but what are our goals moving forward? Recognizing that we had said the challenge and making changes, further change to zoning in other parts of town is we're now going to be in this additional space of having to worry or balance housing with environmental protection. So that's where we are now. Like I just don't want to rehash what we already know for the other stuff. Let's keep moving. That's okay.
Good point.
Thank you.
I think I have 3 things.
3 things.
One is just something that was prompted from the last planning commission meeting and also the way that we're talking about it here. We keep saying rural, and I think we mean we live in a rural town, but I just want to make sure that we're talking about changes not just to rural ag and forestry, but to village and to low density resident. Like we're talking about everything outside of village centers, just to make sure that that's clear to folks. Unless I'm wrong, in which case I would battle. The other thing, we've been talking a lot tonight about cluster development, which makes sense given that we started from the articles. I think another thing that we really want to be talking about too, that's part of the middle, is multifamily. We haven't talked about that as much, we're hinting around it, but just want to make sure that multifamily is out there. And then the last thing in terms of infill and septic capacity, just because it's very front of mind for me right now, because I've been in all of the certificates of occupancy and building permits for the last year. In 2024, we had building permits for 5 ADUs, which is pretty great and cool. Only one of them was in a village center. Most of the ADUs that we see, which makes sense again because of this septic capacity issue, but most of the ADUs that we see are in rural ag, maybe low density residential. And as an aside, I think there's also, outside of the scope of this, but a little bit of a public education campaign. I unfortunately just had to replace my leach field and put in a mount system. And adding one more bedroom was, I mean, it was a fraction of a fraction of the cost of the overall project to just add that extra bedroom so that we have the capacity to put in the ADU. And
You
I,
mean adding, not a literal bedroom, having
the
septic
septic
for
capacity,
another-
right, we're zone, or we're grant permitted for 4, well, now we're permitted for 5, but we were permitted for 4. And the cost of that was just minuscule. And so, you know, in comparison to the entire project, but I think that that's important information for people to be thinking about. And again, the point about septic capacity is true, that that's probably not gonna affect as many people in village centers as it will in other areas.
Well, what you're saying about ADUs in the rural areas, I said this to Chris. So the second bullet up there, where in town should we focus clustered development? And I was like, a little worried about showing the picture of the little circle neighborhood. Because that is a very, you know, definite idea of what clustered development is. But when I think about clustered development, I think like adding an ADU or adding, you know, 2 houses on a driveway pretty close to the road. Like there are other ways of accomplishing clustered, which I also think is like creative ways of infill, but they're sort of the same, but they're sort of, they're complementary ideas. So I think just think outside that subdivision Tyler Place model when we think about clustered. There's other ways of making things clustered and sharing infrastructure.
So in terms of the questions that are up on the screen now, some of the answers may be not complicated. And they may be very straightforward, like how do we balance access to housing and environmental protection? I mean, Wendy was saying, well, we've already got the maps that show the protected resources, so we just need to see where we fit housing that doesn't disrupt those resources. I mean, it could be very simple, but it could also be a much more nuanced conversation.
And then another variable to look at too, Chris, is, you know, where are the soils that support development? We've talked about that before. And where are the soils that we want to conserve because they have potential for ag use down the road? And I know that that's can be in conflict because those same soils are good for development.
It would be great if there was that we had a discussion on each of those questions and we arrived at a consensus as to what that answer would be. What I expect is that we will have a more broader, far-reaching discussion. And then I will bring back to the next planning commission sort of a summary and what my recommendation is based on the discussion.
Chris, what was your takeaway from the death to the single family article?
I felt like I don't really feel. It kind of gets back to, I think, what Susan was asking in terms of like the lot size question. I don't know if I care if there's a apartment building somewhere out in the middle of somewhere, if it's designed in a way that I think is consistent with what the vision for the town is, like if it's screened or it's got lots of open space around it. I mean, whether it's an apartment or a single family home or a duplex or a row of, you know, town, I don't really, it's not so important to me what the housing type is. And single family just does seem to be take up a lot of space.
So how do you think we get from where we are to where we want to be?
Where do we want to be?
With a ton more housing, a variety of housing. And based on some of the feedback we've gotten, more opportunities for more people in more parts of town to have housing that's affordable, that's more affordable than is currently available.
Yeah, there are so many factors that go into cost.
There are.
Yes.
Almost all of which are outside of our control.
Yes, so it's like making sure the zoning just isn't precluding something from
Mhm.
happening. So,
Which you could make the argument that the 10-acre lot size is doing.
precluding a certain type of
Yeah.
housing.
Yeah, it's precluding anything that's not expensive.
It's
Hmm.
precluding a
It's
certain.
not, you can put up a shack if you want to, but you probably can't afford the property if all you can do is a shack.
Well, sure.
Chicken and egg kind of
Yeah,
thing.
if you're spending $200
Well, I will,
on the land, or,
just because I've been in the data, one of our certificates of occupancy in 2024 was a tiny house that is on a nice piece of property in Fitzsimons.
Yes, it
Right,
is.
and it's how big is that lot? 4 acres?
Or off the top of my head, probably something, it's not 10.
Right,
Yeah, it's less.
but, right. So the house itself, right, it's not, you're not forcing the
Right.
person to.
And it's having an LDR zone.
But,
it's a 3 acres, so.
Yeah, 3
Yeah.
acre.
Yeah.
Does it intend to stay a tiny house?
but, and I'm not sure how much I care. Like if that's their foot in and they own that land and they slowly grow and grow, you're like, great, that's
Yeah.
exactly the kind of story that we want in Jericho, among many others. Again, the multifamily is, so like the 10-acre, it doesn't say that you can't put a tiny house there. It does probably keep out, it does keep out a certain socioeconomic demographic. And our 10-acre zoning, our use table currently doesn't allow for multifamily housing that may be more affordable to a lower socioeconomic. So what does the 10 acres do or not do? I also just want to name the tension of, I don't want to overregulate ourselves out of one problem and into another. And I think, Susan, what you brought up about was a really good observation that I missed, which is it's both zoning and policy.
Yeah.
And talking about understanding what the goals are, what the vision is, what the town's priorities are, and communicating those through policy, and then having zoning that doesn't get in the way of, welcoming all sorts of people and all of their creative ideas for how they want to.
Yep. Can I offer, if we go back, I love to live at the goals and I love that other people like to go into the nitty gritty, right? I do, because tonight was supposed to be goals, and so it's like it's my sweet spot. So I'm gonna bring us back to goals, and you're gonna run circles around me when we're in the other parts, right? So I think Chris Brown did a beautiful job of saying what is the goal, right? So Chris Brown said, what we really want is a greater number of opportunities for mixed housing options throughout town. That's our goal. And that we want to do that in a way that honors the maps that we already have, as Wendy pointed out, for both conservation and she's adding soils. And that one of the key mechanisms that has been identified is eliminating the restriction on multifamily housing where possible. So if we string those thoughts together and then work on the other things. But I think at a high level, I guess I would just pressure test. Do we all agree? Because Chris, I think you, Shaheen, you were asking us to come out of this meeting with a shared statement of goals. And so what I would ask is, how do we collectively feel about the statement that our goal, our primary goal, is to create a greater number of opportunities or options for mixed housing or of mixed housing options throughout town that recognizes our all the great work that's been done on the maps for our conservation, our environmental protection. And then we have a question mark about whether or not we overlay soils.
And soils is specific. I think there's a lot of.
Yeah.
Soils is a specific example of like buildable.
Right. So, but if we keep it, so could we start with that goal? Is there a nuance to that goal that feels like it's missing, given where we've been in our conversations? And I'm thinking like each member of this committee has been thinking about it from a different perspective. Like Susan, I know you know the town plan in and out, and SJ knows the affordable housing thing, and Sabina and Wendy know the conservation world. So we each put on those differential hats that we have. Does that goal fit? Or what sub goals need to be there?
Sort of along for the ride for most of it, and then the phrase throughout town just like
And that was
throws me. I go, whoa, hold on.
okay. So
I don't know.
you don't know.
I need to think about a lot of other things,
Okay.
depending on where that throughout, what that actually means.
I had a similar reaction and I was wondering, I mean, I'm not opposed to the throughout town, but I wondered if it could be given a little more.
Some more boundaries.
Right, so
Yeah.
I'm wondering how we fine tune it so that what is an opportunity in one district is similar but different in another district. So you would have your multifamily or some kind of missing middle housing
Yeah.
in one district. You could have a version of that was in tune with the other district, so they would both be achieving the ultimate goal of a diverse housing stock. But what was good in one area might not be good in the other area. So how do we make those two distinctions?
Right, so the goal is to have multiple options available that are appropriate to the area without giving a one size fits all of what that housing looks like.
Right, because I don't know that we have been presented with enough data on how to achieve that goal
Right.
for these forested areas or
Oh, yeah.
the rural, the ag areas. Like, I don't feel like I have heard from enough experts to say, here's how you can achieve that goal
Oh, I
without
agree.
compromising the resources.
Right.
You know, I don't know the answer, but I still feel like we need to do more homework on it.
So in your mind, is the goal different than what we have currently?
What we have where?
Well, for our current
Like the
zoning
town plan?
regulations, yeah, the town plan and the current zoning regulations is, I guess I'm asking, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm
Yeah.
asking, as you going through that, I was thinking to myself, well, how is that different than where we are today? And
Well, it is different. I'm just saying, so what kind of housing do we want to pick? Like for this conversation? Like
The Starbird condos. Those are a condo is a single family, technically. But there's 8 of them and they have a shared wall. I don't know the Starbird structure, so maybe that's more of the townhouse structure.
The townhouse structure. yeah.
Okay,
Right, and I think what I'm saying is just can we accept the goal without and say, And of course, there are gonna be all sorts of parameters that we need to follow, right? So what we said is, if the goal is to have the fullest range of housing options in each of our areas of town, recognizing that there are going to be constraints, differential constraints in different areas of town, because in some areas, we're gonna have conservation area, or we're gonna have examples like soils that are gonna prohibit certain kinds, but that the ultimate goal is to do our best to have the most diversity of opportunities and the least barriers to different kinds of, like, that our goal is to reduce the barriers to different kinds of housing to the extent that we can without violating all the great work that we've already done around the mapping. Right? So it's a very high level goal.
Well, yeah, so I like the train of thought though that Chris, you were saying like, okay, well, we have what we have now, like each district has a goal and each district has a land use pattern. And so you pose the question, like, is what we have now, does it need to change? Right?
Mhm.
So I think and I thought, Sabina, maybe you were thinking about answering that question. So, because you said, well, think about a certain typology.
Right. So again, I'm agreeing that we should think about what's possible.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's necessarily gonna be the same exact possibility for each of our districts.
I agree.
Well, would that imply excluding, say, condominium developments, Alice Starburg, to use a good example, on Plains Road or on Governor Peck Road or Brown's Trace Road in a rural district? Would we be saying that because this is a district with X characteristics, this type of housing is not allowed here? Or are we saying if the overall goal is to increase the amount of housing and to increase the options that people can build, if the soils and the environment will support an 8-unit condo development, why would we say it's allowed here but not there if both of them have the same physical characteristics that would allow it? I think that's the
Right.
the point we're trying to get at.
Exactly it.
Okay.
Eric, that's what I was aiming for, that we would not be discriminating as long as it's still. Because the ultimate goal, as opposed to conservation or maintaining some kind of, sort of ideal of what the different zones have, like the different have. We would be basically releasing some of that because our goal is to increase the diversity of housing options. Because we believe that by doing that, we will enable greater opportunity for diversity of people to join as neighbors for us. And that's what we really want, because it will also increase both our diversity as well as contributions to town moving forward.
It allows different income groups to be able to live. in
That
here.
goal though,
I mean, I'm channeling my inner Chuck with this.
Yeah, please
I'll be
do.
right.
that
Right.
goal, to me, is half the goal. Because
Okay.
the other half of the goal is the balance, which is sort of the way that Chris had the question up there, which was, how do you enable more diverse housing, I guess, more diverse housing types in more areas of town? Sounds better to me than throughout
Oh,
town.
I'm with you on
In
that.
more areas of
Yeah.
town, while balancing that with I forget how they had it up there, around environmental protection and natural resources.
Well, and I think that what I was offering, Susan, if you don't mind making this in a little bit of
Sure,
a
yeah,
dialogue, is
go ahead.
that I love your amendment, more areas of town, recognizing our existing maps for the conservation map. So how are we balancing with environmental protection? I'm grounding that in the fact that we have brilliant people in our town who've already done the mapping. Yes. That's how we're gonna do it. Like I gave that a how is we're balancing it because we've already said these are the areas that we want to protect. Right? Or are we not quite there yet? And I have a mythological idea of.
No, I mean, I think maybe
That's too.
that's one really good resource to help
Okay.
the conversation, help the, the decision making, but I sort of like your two of hearts and raise you a king, but I also think have two thoughts. One is Eric said, well, why wouldn't we allow this, that, or the other thing? I think condo maybe was a bad example because condos are single family, so that would just be like a density question. I think you could do starboard anywhere. But the why not that you would or that you wouldn't are the other considerations, which is how, what does it take for that community to be connected or to be supported or to be serviced by fire department or to what kind of, what are its traffic patterns and how rutted is that road and what are the flood risks of that location, which goes back to sort of the maps. I don't know that that would change the housing type as much as that would change the intensity or the number of houses or the numbers of households or the numbers of people. Like he was saying, I don't know that it matters if it's 4 households in one building or 4 households individually. It is a difference because the amount of impervious surfaces and the amount of cars and the amount of outdoor lighting and the amount of dogs and the amount of everything is exponential by number of households, more so than number of bedrooms. And then wait, I had one more thing. So that was Eric's question about why wouldn't you? I don't know that we wouldn't, but I just think that is what we want to think about, which is why some areas may be more conducive than others. Oh, I know. The last answer is, so Chris, you said, is what we're doing now okay? And what I would add as a goal is that we achieve more efficient land development. Like right now, sort of 10 acres here and 10 acres there and house here and house here, house there, while like lovely did not seem efficient at all. It's not really, you're not really preserving agricultural opportunity and you're just driving everywhere and you can't walk anywhere. So I would add in some of that connectivity and efficient land use, because you started us on a smart growth, principles of smart growth list that he stated were some really great goals. So I would suggest that our goal would be to expand these housing opportunities, but within the context of applying the principles of smart growth that make sense for us. They might not all make sense, and we should be critical thinkers about them and not just accept them at face value, but there's the inefficient pattern today. I think we're suffering.
Would it be less inefficient? And just to follow down that pathway a little further. If you had a 15-unit condo development that's outside of the village centers in one of the other districts on land that's owned for 10 acres, but puts in the 10 units. So in other words, if you have higher density in one local area or a larger number of units in a single building, does that harm the environment more, less, the same? Is it desirable?
That's the question that I would like the answer to.
Yeah.
Which I haven't found yet, which is why I keep doing this, but not because I'm opposed to the outcome, it's just because I want to know more about.
Yeah.
This is what I meant by unintended consequences way back last year which I regretted saying on so many occasions. But,
It's a perfectly reasonable and responsible thing to have said, and that we should all consider and
Yes.
keep going.
Well, to Eric's point, does it matter if it's 2 4-unit apartment buildings that are 8 units or 8 single-family homes? It's the same.
But the visual effect, the same traffic load, same septic load, same water demand, a little more electric power lines and phone lines, okay? But the visual impact is, which one is worse? And, you know, we have these areas in town that have fantastic views. As you all know, I care about view sheds a lot. What's worse? An 8-unit building in one area with the rest of it well preserved, or 8 houses scattered along.
right,
And that's what, when we look at our 10-acre zones and our wider zones, it's because someone back in the 60s and 70s said, I would rather see a bunch of isolated houses than one big one there.
but I think you're giving an alternative. I'm not I just wanna push back and say, you're giving an alternative that is anthropomorphic. My view is being impacted, right? From my perspective, the alternative view is what is the impact on actual nature? Like the animals,
Mhm.
right? So the moose, the bears, the fireflies, everything else besides us, right? So that's my other,
Yeah, and
but I think the view, like the using that example of my view is being impacted, that's just another human construct.
I'll take your construct though, and so apply it.
Mm-hmm.
For fireflies, for birds, for bears, which one is the greater impact?
And that's what we don't know yet.
That's what
Right.
she's asking.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying
The 8-family development,
to people who may say, Jericho, we just don't know that answer, and you're just gonna have to do your best and work with the information we have in 2025, which in 2050, we might say, well, that was a dumbass idea.
Right.
But, you know, we just don't know, but I'm not ready. I'm still undecided as to what the actual impact will be.
Well,
I can
think-
see it both ways. I can see saying footprint's the same, you're not disturbing more land. But I don't have the actual data.
I think you're really bringing up something super important, Sabina, that like when we go to goals before values, right? So I made a statement that I was saying, right, based on what I was hearing about increasing the diversity of housing in as many, you know, not throughout, but in more places, right? Protecting our environment in the way we have, right? Like, and it's still very much presuming that we have a shared value amongst us that increasing housing opportunities for people and taxes and whatever is more important than perhaps, right? The environmental impacts and the impacts on our natural land and our natural, you know, our natural neighbors, right? So I think it's just the question that I think if we go back to the town plan and what we have heard a lot. And we are in a moment nationally of really pushing for more housing, and that is number one, right? So if we're like, it's almost like a ranking of like if we have to trade off, where are the trade-offs and what's gonna win, right? What we heard, I think I heard through the town plan work and our affordable housing work and what we're hearing from folks is that, like it or not, housing is trumping somewhat, but we want to moderate it so that it doesn't impact the longer term view of we humans are on par with nature as opposed to over nature, which is, I think, what you're saying too. And I fundamentally agree with you, Sabina, just in terms of my ethics and life. So that's the balance. That was a long-winded support of what you're saying. Sorry.
Well, if,
The
you know,
best for nature,
I
we all
went
live.
back to look, I went back to read our vision statement in our town plan, which I think answers a lot of, like, when we talk about shared values and when we're talking about like what is it we want. I mean, we say bullet point 3, all of its residents, including wildlife, can thrive. Ecosystems and habitats, agricultures and forests and working lands are actively protected to ensure a resilient community, provide healthy food, and revitalize a rural economy. And the bullet point right above it is, we want to offer residents a wide range of housing choices. Children can attend Jericho's excellent schools, older residents can age in place and actively contribute to community. So we did a lot of this hard thinking when we were writing the vision statement for the town plan. We talk about how we want to have interconnected trails. So I guess I feel like it's important to have this conversation now, and it's important to remember how we came to consensus when we were writing that vision statement, and that consensus was based on what we were hearing from other Jericho residents.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Chris is furiously taking notes, so.
Oh. Just looked at the clock too. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
I
that went fast.
I just want to make sure that we talked a lot about increased housing options, which sounds a lot like types of housing, and I just want to. I think we're all on the same page, which is kind of what you were getting at, Heidi.
Yeah.
That we need more housing than what we already have too. So it is going to have to things are going to have to substantially change to accommodate development at a higher pace than what we've been accustomed to the last 20 years.
I mean, but I would feel successful, I guess, if we in Jericho kind of followed the pattern that they want in Vermont, which is that 80% of new development happens around in the village areas where we have a prayer of providing infrastructure, and we already have development and we already have developed areas. I'm a little sensitive to economic cycles also. I'm thinking about the demographics and aging and how long it takes to get new housing online. And has anybody ever sat down and said, like, well, if we bring all this new housing online in 15 years, like right now we have a supply constraint.
Yeah.
And I know that like the housing targets from CCRPC was analyzed that said, based on our population and our employers and everything, these are the targets. So I guess it seems to me like achieving our targets is kind of like a good guidepost also, and that the majority of that development occurs mostly in the areas slated for development. But the problem with that is that unless we change how the rural areas are structured, then the only thing we're getting in the rural areas is single family. And I think that that is a problem.
I'd go just one other point. I mean, I think if you look at our existing development core and you look at it on a map, very few of those lots don't already have a house on them.
Well, that's where like targeted info would help you find opportunities for that.
So I jotted down answers to each of those questions based on
Great.
discussion.
Okay.
So let me share those and get feedback on that. So in the first one, in terms of how should we balance access to housing, environmental protection, I wrote, allow as much flexibility to create housing as much and as diverse as possible that still protects natural resources already mapped and identified. Anything wrong with that?
Read it again.
Allows as much flexibility to create housing as much and as diverse as possible that still protects natural resources already mapped and identified.
I don't know that I want to say it, but, because I don't know if I agree with it, but did you want to add to that something like consistent with the district's, what is it?
Purpose.
Purpose, thank you.
With the intent of zoning districts is currently defined in the zoning.
The purpose of each zoning district.
Yeah.
Well, in
Does that get at what you were saying, Susan?
Does that limit what can be done then in
Yeah.
districts?
Yeah,
That's why I'm not sure
Is
that I
that
like
what
it.
you wanna do?
No, I'd like to read, can we revisit the districts a different night?
Yes.
Thank you. Because I'm not ready to say that at all.
I'm not either, but I
Yes.
think that that's
Yeah.
what you were starting to kind of
Yeah.
push back on earlier.
Well, I think what that would, to argue for that, what that would do is if we want to have tailored approaches for different areas of town, that gives you a place to start.
Right. We did do that when we reviewed PUD. What was that? I think we revised PUD so that at least the PUD would make sense depending on the district. So open space in the rural area at 50%, but if you're doing a PUD in a village center, maybe it was like a pocket park or a playground or something else, so that there's some good potential. We wouldn't be starting from scratch with that.
Maybe that can be some of our homework. Right, because I haven't read,
Yeah.
I will self-assign that homework, but I don't know if other people need it as well.
I will make a note to
Okay.
do some sort of a discussion on that at the next meeting.
That'd be really great. I'm sorry for taking us back for those of you who might have, maybe it's just some newbie.
That was kind of weedy for you, Heidi.
I know. Good job. I'm really trying hard. I know.
So for the next one, where in town should we focus cluster development? Here's what I got as a start. Options for more housing should be considered in more areas of town that ... So I really didn't answer it, but I think the more areas of town, I think people like that. But I think,
And I think Susan's point of what is clustered, right? Like, our vision of clustered could be different in different parts of town. So what's clustered in the villages may look different than what's clustered
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
on Farm Road.
Yeah.
Like that example you showed, right? That was clustered housing associated with the farm.
yeah,
That looks different than maybe something that was smack in the middle of Riverside.
Right, I'm not sure it's the right question,
Right.
to be
agree.
honest.
Yeah,
maybe it's too soon for that.
yeah.
Could you read that again, please?
Options for more housing should be considered in more areas of town that ...
I think that is that are compatible with the purpose of that district. Might be the way to look at it. So then a very dense center district should have a less dense rural district should have maybe a big cluster, but it's on a larger lot, so the density per development is the same.
Maybe it should say, how can cluster development be applied in different areas of town?
We really want cluster development everywhere. It's just that cluster would be different depending on where we are.
And how close it is to another cluster.
Yeah.
I agree that it's
Village
not
could
the right question. I
Yeah.
think that's what we've decided is that it's not the right question.
What did you just reframe the question to, Chris Brown? You said how?
Well, I think we want cluster development everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just a question of how it gets um, differentiated in different parts of town.
Yeah,
How
it's
big the
used.
cluster is, what's it?
Yeah, type and size and.
That's
Yes.
how can it be applied in different areas?
Right.
yeah, how can it be applied? And in the death to the single family zoning article, I sort of came away with this list of criteria for good locations for missing middle housing was where you can drive efficient land use. You're relatively close to your town center. It said no lot assembly, so potentially it's like, fits in with the existing land use pattern.
It means you don't have to buy 3 or 4 lots to make it happen.
Right, like we've heard the example, like, well, to do, 5 houses, I need 50 acres. That is not really driving an efficient land use.
I think it's also if you wanted to do a development like that, say in Starbird, or let's go to Griswold instead, you'd have to assemble 5 or 6 houses, lots, tear it down and then put up something new in the place. And I think that's what they mean when they say assemble lots.
Right, right. So I thought those were pretty good criteria.
Here, I know we think this may not be the right question, but I think I have the right answer.
Hey, I'll go for it, right?
So what's the question you're answering?
Isn't that hey, Jeopardy?
Let me give the answer and then we can figure out what it is. Okay. We want cluster development throughout town with criteria for how different types of clustering are realized depending on the context.
Sure, yeah, I get what you
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
And we may not like or agree on clustering, but that is wording we've used. It is wording.
It is,
that-
I think the
We have it.
wording is good, it's just that what clustering means.
looks
We
different.
need lots of different examples that say, well, this is clustered, like the thing, like the farm picture. Like farms, old farms are clustered. You've got the barn and the milk house and the this and the that. You've got like this whole little compound. That's a cool model for an agriculture area, better than a cul-de-sac with, 30 houses around the thing. Like a farmyard thing with like a duplex and a quad and a little apartment building and a milking house, like it's not necessarily limiting as much as a cul-de-sac seems. Yeah.
I mean, you had in there that the clusters should allow for a variety of housing types.
Right. Right, because a
I think,
cluster of
yeah.
all different things would be more interesting than a cluster of all the same.
And I
Yeah.
think one of the
Yeah,
words
I'd be
that
100% on that.
Chris S used was flexible. There was something at one point when you were reading it back, Chris S would.
Oh, the
that-
first one was,
Right.
allows much flexibility to create housing.
Right, that it's that same idea, like sort of flexible design, getting at the point of clustering or something. But I'm still of the, where should we focus cluster development is the wrong question. It's like, it's more like, how do we? I think it's like, how do we support? Like Susan, you were saying, the values or the principles of smart growth in a flexible way in different parts of town, right?
Right.
So that it's not just one model.
Right. Because every site is different. And,
Right.
You're like off a paved road, 100 feet, or you're off a dirt road, 500 feet. Those are really different.
Heidi, would a different way of phrasing your question or your objection to the second one be instead of where should we locate it? Is should we focus cluster development anywhere in town
Right, or let it be.
or let it go where it goes?
Or how should we enable clustered development
That assumes we
In-
want it.
different parts of town?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Different types of clusters.
I can't
Okay.
recall it off the top of my head, but the town plan somewhere specifically talks about clustering.
Yes,
Oh,
right.
it's in the
Oh,
getting it
yeah.
done section.
Oh, it's also here too. And this is in the stewarding a resilient community section. In strategy 1, it says incentivize clustering for any new development that may be permitted into areas of parcels that will have the least impact. And that's part of the protect and conserve Jericho's natural resources. As that's strategy number 1. So that's one of the ways to achieve strategy 1. The other part of that, there are 4 bullet points. One of the other bullet points is direct most new development into and near the village growth area where infrastructure can be provided to sustain compact villages and neighborhoods interspersed with rural countryside and forested hilltop.
Right.
So this is
Right,
page 13 of the green chapter.
right. And most of those we have done
Right.
already. The question is, can we use the same principles for the lower density areas and the rural areas of town? Right? Like, how do we apply those same principles in other areas of town? Because we've done a good job with the village centers and districts.
Well, you're saying, in my mind goes like popcorn, like, is part of the constraint is the density limit in the low density district. Like, why is that district lower density, and is it the right level of density now? Like, if we did nothing, if all we did was increase the density in the low density residential district, say as a starting point, like, how much would that move the needle compared to all these other things? Because we can't control costs. We know the land values are expensive. We know all the big lots are out there. It would take a lot, I think, to really change the pattern of development in the rural, super rural areas. But if that 3-acre zoning was 1-acre zoning or half-acre zoning, like, that's where all the paved roads are, like, overnight with that, as long as you could provide septic, I guess, as long as the lot. So what is I asked Chris this question, like, what is the minimum lot size to get a house or a quad, a septic and a well? Is it 1 acre? Is it 2 acres? Is it a half acre with no municipal? Oh, but there's water there. So you don't need the water shield. Anyway, that's way too in the weeds, but I'm looking at, because Heidi started at the beginning, like, let's not make assumptions. And I think that's a big assumption, is how that district, especially that district, is currently organized.
Yeah.
That might really be providing more constraint than anything else. Like, when you, SJ, looked at the housing stats, that was a decent amount of that was the location of a decent amount of development, was the low density residential district. So do we think we would have had triple the houses there if we had 1-acre zoning there instead of 3? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's where PUDs are going in. That's where. Possible.
That closest to all the services that we have.
And do we think that would be more enticing to developers? As, if you had to have choices, would they?
Yeah, I think it would be more enticing to developers of condos, duplexes, triplexes, quads, small apartment buildings than, way out there. Personally, but that's not a database fact. Okay, now you want to ask to give us your answer to the last question.
Well, yeah, the last one was what resources some places must be safeguarded. I'm just going back to what Wendy had said earlier. A lot of these natural resources are already mapped in the town plan. I don't think they are all on a natural resource overlay, but they are in the town plan on other maps.
True.
And we have the forest assessment that is new for. So that was my answer, was really just relying on these existing resources that we have.
Okay, does it feel like we're coming to the end of this discussion? Does anybody have any additional thoughts to share at this moment?
You know, I have one, Susan, and just when you were talking about the low density residential, like making small changes there might mean a big outcome. And I started thinking about the commercial district again.
Yeah.
Because I just think that that is an area of town that also has that same potential. That changes there can make a big impact.
Yeah, I agree. So that's a good reminder, like we're thinking a lot about like forestry, rural ag, but we really also want to include the commercial district. It's what I think SJ said, it's everything outside. It's everything else outside,
Yeah.
not just the most rural, because then we're skipping all the stuff in between.
But what current zoning regulations are prohibiting development in the commercial district?
Well, it is 1 acre minimum lot size there.
Okay, well, if we'd seen a bunch of 1 acre places going in there, I might
Mhm.
buy that argument, but
Single family homes are a conditional use. Not a permitted use there.
Aren't,
Which is
multi-use,
traditional
multi-apartment,
Pardon?
apartment dwellings are permitted to lot that.
Yeah, and the BMG makes it 5+ is permitted, so, or 10+ is like the largest one.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, it might be 10, I think maybe 10+, but it's just single family homes are not, but single family homes, I think, are the only conditional use in the commercial.
I think the name of the district is potentially a barrier to people imagining what's possible there.
yes, unless you think that the concept of having Jericho having commercial district is useful. I mean, it's an exclusively commercial.
Well, I was answering your question about like what parts of the regulation
Yeah.
are a constraint to housing. And I think by having it called a commercial district, a lot of people just sort of don't even get into it. It's like, well, I'm gonna do, you know, it's like gas stations and stuff.
I will summarize everything and get something back that tries to articulate it so we can refine it.
Can I be Rosie over here?
Mhm.
I think we actually did a really good job.
Yeah.
I feel the exact opposite. All right, I know. The tone right now feels really like.
We didn't say anything new. We've said all this before. It's written in the town plan. We've had this conversation a gazillion times. Sorry.
So do you feel like
I'm in a
it's,
bad mood. I don't feel like we've moved anywhere bad. I just feel like, we haven't moved. I feel like we haven't moved.
We're circling.
But that's okay.
Are we circling like
Starting-
rain or are we circling to enlightenment?
Yes, the jury's out.
We're just circling.
Just trying out.
no, but
This was a whole meeting.
So what
The
would-
vision statement that Wendy pointed out, we've already written. Sorry, I'm
So what could we have
bad
done?
place. I'm so sorry.
What could we have done better? I mean, seriously, what would be your advice to move forward?
What's our next meeting?
That we could do
What's our next
on
meeting?
our own at home
Oh,
between now and then?
looking at housing typologies and allowable uses.
right.
I mean, the focus was to review, which we
did
did.
it. Yeah, no,
Right.
we reviewed.
Is there an action you would like us to take out from this, other than we reviewed it?
I'm sorry, guys. I was having emotional reactions to it.
You are being consistent. When we laid this out, you were like, why are we? Yeah.
Right, but I liked the intention, which is, are we all on the same page before we move forward, right? And I think what we
That
affirm
has value.
is that we are on the same page.
It has what?
I say we're on the same.
Value,
Same chapter.
Station has value.
Right, and we have affirmed that that we've affirmed that we are still in the same place that we were when we helped to create the town plan,
2 years ago.
right?
Yeah.
Which is awesome. We have affirmed that we have more information because we had to go through many challenging conversations before. So we at least know what our questions are. Like, I think before we didn't even know what our questions were because we didn't have enough
We
information,
even
right?
know what the questions shouldn't be.
Right? So I think in that sense, in terms of the idea, you have to go slow to go fast, right? Like to really make sure so that we don't have to circle this again. We can now say like, oh yeah, affirmed, move on. Like affirmed infrastructure is gonna be the thing that's gonna be our Achilles heel. Affirmed that we have great maps that are going to guide us. Affirmed, like, we can help manage each other from circling as we move forward, because now we've affirmed all
Well,
those
and I
things.
see a large participant in said circling, so I keep. I was in it with y'all, so it's all good.
Yeah, it's laborious to do a reset. But I do think that it's important to do a reset because we've been working on like from a totally different point of view. And I think I'm gonna self-assign myself going back and looking at some of that good town plan work that we did, because I didn't do it in advance of this meeting. And I think that will be helpful for the next meeting. We also didn't have Chris Shaheen with us when we were on our town plan journey. And so now we're like really all on the same page.
My question also would be, what would, in an ideal world, what would Jericho look like in 50 years? Like, do any of us have an actual vision for what that would be?
It's a great question.
Because without the vision, it's hard to figure out how to get there. Right now, we're flailing and trying to get more housing and trying to protect the environment.
Should
Both
make
super
that
and listen, but
for next time.
I just think
Does the town plan describe that vision?
I think it describes values more than a vision.
Like an actual vision?
Yeah.
Physical?
Yeah.
And I do think that the targets that the CCRPC has set out give you some ideas about how much growth is projected and or hoped for, and how to accommodate that growth in that vision.
Yes, but that's still, in my mind anyway, not a vision. It's a
No,
goal.
it's not. But I'm saying, like, as you're painting your vision, I find it helpful to know, well, this is about how much bigger we're gonna be, how many more households we're gonna have to accommodate in that vision.
It's worth noting that CCRPC still thinks of Jericho as a veteran community to serve Burlington, the greater Burlington area. So whether or not that is in congruence with what Jericho residents think Jericho should be is another question.
But in CCRPC.
Well,
Moving on.
can we take Chris's suggestion that maybe all of us look through the town plan or look through ourselves and sort of come back here for the next meeting with where do we see Jericho in 50 years? And I think that's a worthwhile goal. And if we're all aligned, that's wonderful. If we're not, where are the overlaps that we can focus on? Because we should be looking at more than just the next
Yeah.
6 months. We should be looking at Jericho. Potentially after all of us are buried underground somewhere or ashes in the wind or whatever you choose to do.
I both love that and I hate it. Right? I don't wanna do it because shit, if we didn't do it during town plan update. I feel like it should happen at the next one because we've got a mandate right now. From this town plan, which says, let's move on this housing. So I just,
Yeah, but
I know, I hear you, like, I'm
my
not,
argument is how can we move forward if we don't know where we want to be? All we know right now is that we want more housing and we want to protect the environment. Those are great goals, but it doesn't, in my mind anyway, to tell us what we want the town to look like.
I think it does. I think it talks about clustered development in villages surrounded by rural working farms and working lands and protected natural resources.
We need to play Sim City and then.
Nice. Nina. Yes.
There's a
You
very
and
good
me
time
and
waster.
laptops and SimCity and some good snacks.
and on the snacks.
My answer to you, Chris, should have been, I think it may already do that. I shouldn't have been so definitive. I mean, I think it already does give a pretty clear vision for the long-term growth of the town.
I think it's more of a vanilla version of things gonna be rural, nice, and there'll be some clustered houses and there'll be some farms and it's kind of, let's just say it's a really, really gauzy, out of focus vision. And maybe a little more focus would be nice.
How would you suggest that we approach this exercise?
For those of us who can't draw.
Well,
Or,
for me, it often comes down to like, is there an example of a community that is 50 years ahead of where Jericho is now, that we look at today and say, that's a great model? Like, is there a community that, is 50% bigger than us right now? And what does it look like? And how did they, I mean, the other piece of this for me that's so makes it also complicated is that Jericho is a really eclectic and diverse geographic place with a lot of nuance through different parts of town. There is no town center. We've got 3 village centers. I mean, there's no place. And so a lot of the traditional town planning concepts, I think, are really hard to make work in Jericho because it doesn't lend itself to that. And so I think it's just a really complicated problem or challenge to sort of figure out how to, guide the town forward. Anyway.
We've got about 5 minutes. I didn't have a town planner report, but I did want to just circle back, and so 3 people expressed interest in going to the LCT town fair, so I think Eric,
Yep.
Sabina, Susan, right? So you guys should all be registered for that, and then,
we're going to the municipal day.
oh, the 3 of you go to municipal day, okay. Then there were 2 people who wanted to go to the town fair. Great, so Sabina and Susan are registered for that, so that's all I have for a town.
If you move the weather report.
I know, it was good weather, it was good weather. The hurricane didn't come ashore, so that was good.
Does anybody else have anybody updates?
I'd like to make 2. Just, housing committee is going to meet, fully remote next week, because this room is being used by the abatement folks. And, the town meeting kickoff, is September 20th. we are looking for some volunteers for that day, so if you're gonna be around, and planning to attend and maybe willing to volunteer.
So Thursday is the select board hearing. They have it posted to start at 6 p.m.
Oh, it is.
At 6 what?
6 p.m.,
Okay.
not 6:30, not 7.
And do we know where it is on the agenda?
It's the hearing, so it's just the
Is
hearing.
it, okay, it's just, oh, thank you. That was what I didn't understand.
And then they'll have their meeting, and depending on how they
Thank
structure
you.
it, they might decide whether or not they're gonna adopt it or have another hearing or do other things, but hopefully we are hoping and that they will choose to vote to adopt the zoning amendments. I do know that Chris Flynn, or you guys probably all saw this too, had it administered applications now using the new zoning.
Oh.
So as soon as the select board warns their first hearing, the proposed zoning is the zoning that they use going forward. I don't know how retroactively it works if it, for some reason.
It's sort of like, I don't know if you know the concept of an at-risk window, like if you build a window. It's like at-risk zoning. It's like you can use it.
Yeah,
But if you actually go forward and build something that complies with it and not the new regs and it's not adopted, then you need to come into compliance with the regs.
so that will be Thursday. And, I met with each of the 2 new select board members I didn't really know them that well, to have like a personal conversation with them, and they were very excited to be in their new roles and happy to be working with the planning commission. They both said, what does the planning commission need from the select board or want from the select board? Which I thought was an interesting question. Answered them, good decision making, listening, good communications, stuff like that. I think that.
You didn't include just rubber stamp everything we do?
Yeah, no. No, I did suggest, they had both read the town plan, and I said, if you really want to understand the town plan, look at the public engagement appendix. And they both seemed pretty inspired to do that, so we'll see. Any other business? Okay, so our next meeting is the 16th. We already know what our agenda will be. Where we're gonna look at housing topologies and we're gonna review what we reviewed tonight. Yes, okay.
And thank you, Wendy, for setting the bar so high with going back and reading everything.
Yes.
You're
Now
welcome.
we all have to catch up to Wendy.
Yeah.
Okay, does somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Sarah Jane,
And I
motion,
second it.
and Heidi, all those in favor of adjourn, say yes.
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 Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
For facilitating that.